In other news we're following for you, Antony Blinken back in Israel, the 8th trip to the Middle East for the U.S. Secretary of State since the start of the war in Gaza. Beginning in Egypt, it comes as a Washington-sponsored ceasefire resolution comes up later in New York for a vote at the UN Security Council, with Hamas so far sticking to its call for a full withdrawal of Israel from Gaza. Blinken insisting that Israel's accepted, he says, the deal, and Arab states should press Palestinian militants to do the same.
If you want a ceasefire, press Hamas to say yes. If you want to alleviate the terrible suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, press Hamas to say yes. If you want to get all the hostages home, press Hamas to say yes. Israel has accepted the proposal. In fact, they were critical in putting it forward. So the only party, no, that is what the official position of the Israeli government and the Prime Minister. So the only party that has not accepted, the only party that's not said yes, is Hamas.
For more, let's cross to Jerusalem and journalist and analyst Noga Tarnopolsky. Thank you so much for speaking with us here on France 24.
Good afternoon.
Before I ask you about what's been a tumultuous 24 hours in Israeli politics, just your comment on the messaging of Antony Blinken saying Israel's accepted the proposal. Now it's time for Hamas to do the same.
Well, that's been the U.S. messaging for a good 10 days now, from that odd Friday night when American President Joe Biden announced what he called the Israeli proposal. The Israeli government has never denied that, despite the clear feeling, especially in the last few days, that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is possibly trying to back away from it. But it's never been denied.
It's never been denied, and so far Hamas is not accepting it. So he may get off the hook once again, Netanyahu. How about what happened with Benny Gantz finally making good, leaving that coalition war cabinet and quitting it for just after the raid to free those 4 Israeli hostages? Is that a problem, or is that something good for Benjamin Netanyahu?
It's both. It's both. The 2 members of the war cabinet, Benny Gantz and his partner Gadi Eisenkot, both of them former chiefs of staff of the army, were very good for Netanyahu because, first of all, they provided him with military experience nobody else in his government comes close to having. Secondly, they provided him with diplomatic cover because they are considered stable and sane compared to most of the rest of his cabinet. And thirdly, they gave him a very easy excuse. Whenever he didn't want to take a step proposed or even demanded by the rest of his cabinet that is very extremist, he could always blame it on them when he said no. So he's lost all of that now. On the other hand, he's now free of those shackles and can probably do more or less whatever he determines he wants to do.
He's got the magic number in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, is 61 seats. Excuse me. He has 64. Is that the way things are going to stand, or could there be some kind of a wild card from within his own party? I'm thinking most specifically of his defense minister. We heard in Gantz's speech him making distinct overtures to Yoav Gallant.
That's right. He made a direct, very personal, almost really passionate plea to Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, a guy who hoped to become Chief of Staff of the Army and never made it and kept kind of a chip on his shoulder. And yet today, he is really the only experienced military person in the entire Netanyahu government. And he has taken a lot of fire from his own camp because he has been unwilling on several crucial occasions to put the army or the nation in danger for Netanyahu's political plans. So today is another one of those days, and that is what Gantz was aiming at. Tonight at around midnight, there's a vote of the Israeli government is forced by the Supreme Court to pass a law determining one way or another what is the draft status for ultra-Orthodox Jews. Now, ultra-Orthodox parties are a crucial part of the Netanyahu coalition, and they've pushed to keep and even increase a full draft exemption for all of their young people. Every other 18-year-old in Israel goes to the army, they don't. So that's been pushed, and Gallant is going to vote no. So anything could happen even tonight. Netanyahu could fire him, and that would probably cause mass protests all over Israel the way it happened last time Netanyahu tried to fire him. He could somehow, take the ultra-Orthodox side but pretend he's not. Or the ultra-Orthodox, if they feel that Netanyahu's slipping out of their hands, they could leave the government tonight or at some point in the next few weeks. All this said, the situation is very volatile, and yet all of these parties have a real interest in sticking by Netanyahu and staying in power. And that's what has held this government together, despite having presided over the worst catastrophe, the worst security catastrophe in the history of this nation.
Is there, sitting in Jerusalem on this Monday evening, is there the sense that this is a forever war?
I wouldn't say there's a sense that it's a forever war, but there's a sense that is reflected also in polls that show 80% of Israelis believe Netanyahu and his government have no plan to end the war. So there's a feeling of suffocation. There's a lot of identification with the families of hostages still held in Gaza. There are a growing number of signs at the protests to free the hostages and the protests for new election. There's a growing proportion calling simply for an end to the war. So all of that is in there. Today, like every other day, there are very significant protests, thousands of protesters against this government on the streets.
Noga Tarnopolsky, many thanks for being with us from Jerusalem.
Thank you.
Stay with us. There's much more to come on France 24. More news plus the day's business and sports.